we use all of the experience and the knowledge and the talent, also the funding that we have to do something about it. Actually, to use technology to make a change, a real change.
Hello, I am very excited to welcome Carsten from Dryad to the interviews today. Carsten and I have spoken a couple of times before, and I found his story and the technology absolutely exciting. So, Carsten, would you please just introduce yourself, say who you are and what it is you do?
Right. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, my name is Carsten Brinkschulte. I'm co-founder and CEO of Dryad Networks. And what we do is we build an ultra early detection system for wildfires. So that we can actually detect wildfires at the smoldering phase at the very early stages, alert the fire brigades so that they get a reasonable chance to extinguish the fire before they get turned into catastrophes.
No, fantastic. And one of the things I remember from our earlier conversation is kind of a bit more about your background and how you kind of pivoted to do what you do now, really. I think that story was really interesting. Would you mind sharing it with us again? That'd be great.
Oh, yeah, my background is mobile network technology. I guess I've spent about 25 years in telecoms, building network infrastructure, software components, and building 4G network infrastructure. And I've done 3 startups and exited all of them. And after I've sold my last company to Twilio, I was basically falling into a hole like you always do after you sell your baby and didn't know really what to do. And I was sitting with a friend of mine having actually some whiskey in the evening. And in the backgrounds, we were seeing the devastating wildfires in the Amazon at the time. And that actually triggered a longer conversation. And we thought like, hey, why don't we use all of the experience and the knowledge and the talent, also the funding that we have to do something about it. Actually, to use technology to make a change, a real change, and not just build the next smartphone up. And actually, that was the trigger for Dryad, actually.
That's amazing. So, I mean, these series of interviews are really to try and understand what drives people to do what they're doing with the technology and the kind of impact that you're looking to have with that. And I think it's quite clear there, really. I think if I understand, you were kind of emotionally driven to create some kind of answer that was going to help solve this for the planet. Do you want to tell me a bit about some of the challenges on how you got that going, and you know how it ended up to be where you are today?
Yeah, going on from that evening, actually, my friend is actually a very gifted hardware electronics developer, a genius, I should say. And I've got the telecommunications background, and of course that, we thought, well, why don't we combine his knowledge, my knowledge, him building sensors and electronics, and me knowing how to build networks and infrastructure and scalable components that actually reach very far and build something that actually scales, because the challenge is ginormous, right? If you want to protect the forest, you're not talking about a few trees here. You're talking about hundreds or thousands or even millions of square miles that we need to protect. And so far, people have tried to do that with satellites and cameras, but these systems are too slow. They detect the wildfires too late. And that's what we learned when we delved into the idea. We've seen other approaches and they didn't work. So we came up with the idea, let's build this ultra early detection system for wildfires so that we can actually prevent those wildfires before they even happen. And that's key. It's like whenever you want to stop a big catastrophe, the best is to stop it in the very early tracks before it actually becomes a big problem. I think the current pandemic teaches us that. we had acted earlier, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in right now. So we want to do the same for for one of the biggest problems, wildfires. And why is wildfires so important? What I've learned, and I didn't know before I started this process, but learned along the way, is that yeah, we all know climate change is the biggest challenge that humanity is facing. I guess that we all agree upon. And then what we don't yet really know is how to solve all of this. But what I learned is that wildfires are contributing up to 20% of the global CO2 emissions each year. Right, that's about the same amount of CO2 that the entire traffic, all cars, all planes, all ships combined put into the atmosphere. So if we could stop wildfires, a significant amount of it, we could have the same impact that Tesla will have, hopefully, turning the car industry into an electric car industry. So that's our vision, that's our ambition. We want to reduce CO2 emissions, and doing that by preventing wildfires and cutting into those 20% and that we're currently seeing.
Yeah, I guess it's more than just the CO2 that's being generated through these wildfires, but you're removing in the fire, you're removing the sink that takes
Yes.
away some of the CO2 as well.
Absolutely, it's a double whammy, right? The wildfires are not only, as you say, pumping an enormous amount of CO2 into the air, also causing damage to human health, lung cancer and other diseases increasing, but they're also basically devastating the world's largest carbon sink, that is still the forest worldwide. And I think we're losing about a football pitch every 30 seconds at the moment due to fires, every 30 seconds. And that's got to stop. If we don't stop that, it's of course increasing the spiral. It's a double whammy, right? You put more CO2 in the air, you reduce the carbon sink that further accelerates the CO2 increase in the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think the topic of air quality is something that has been coming up a lot in my conversations recently. A couple of years ago, I developed some prototypes for some testing equipment, and you can see I've got one up there from it's called the Flow. It's something that I'm very interested in, so maybe I just see more of it. But I think it's a massive problem, and when combined with the pandemic, I think we've all seen the importance of healthy air and healthy lungs. So I guess I'm very interested in understanding moving forward as well what impact in terms of the improvement of air quality we can see by the reduction of wildfires as well.
Yes, there is a direct impact on human health, in particular if the wildfires are in areas where, of course, the people are living. And the smoke travels miles, hundreds of miles, thousands of miles. You sometimes, if you get a huge wildfire in Indonesia, the surrounding countries are complaining to the government of Indonesia that actually they're receiving all of the smoke that comes out of the wildfires, and it has an impact on health in a way that is not fully researched yet, but clearly there is an impact on lung diseases, cancer, and other aspects if you're exposed to prolonged periods of breathing air that's coming out of wildfires. You will have a substantial impact on the entire population's health.
Yeah, I've read some research that has suggested it's linked to a lot more than we appreciate, from cardiac problems to blood problems to general health. I mean, yeah, it's serious. So your technology sounds like it couldn't come at a better time. It sounds like it's really focused at something we need to solve. But there's something that's intriguing me. You said you need to be able to stop it before it happens.
Right.
That sounds a bit Minority Report to me. Tell me, how do you do that?
Right. Okay. Well, that's not exactly true. It's a bit of overselling. Obviously, a wildfire starts very small. About 80, I understand about 87% of wildfires are human induced. And that means basically the proverbial cigarette being thrown out of a driving car, a campfire going out of control, children playing in the forest, setting up unintentionally a wildfire. And all of those things, many of them, in particular cigarettes, are starting out as a smoldering fire, which basically means very, very small. There is no real open fire yet. There is already a change in the atmosphere that can be detected. And that's actually our approach. We want to detect wildfires at the smoldering stage within the first hour as the fire develops, so that then the firefighters still have a good chance to extinguish the fire before it spins out of control. Because that is the real problem. Most wildfires eventually are detected, right? Because as they grow, eventually you can see them from miles apart, afar. And then the fire brigades will be alerted. They arrive at the scene, and the fire is already too big to be extinguished. And that's the biggest problem, right? We see the wildfires, we see them from the sky, from satellites, from aeroplanes, with cameras, but when we see them, it's already too late to extinguish them. And our approach is to actually detect the wildfires at the smoldering phase before there is an open fire, because that gives that critical time advantage to the firefighters to actually extinguish that. And how we're doing that is with gas sensors. Because when you are seeing what's happening at the smoldering phase, there are already a lot of chemical reactions happening. Pyrolysis, that's what it's called. It's when basically the roots and and leaves and needles and other things which are on the ground of the forest floor, they're starting to evaporate because of the heat, and they're basically generating gases, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and another cocktail of gases is already being exposed and thrown into the air by the smoldering fire. And we're basically building gas sensing devices that can detect a change in the air quality and look for patterns that are typical for wildfire. And if they detect them, send out an alert.
Okay, very interesting. And then how do you get those? What technology are you using to connect those? Are they using 5G or 4G or something different?
Well, this is one of the prototypes that we've built earlier last year. It's one of those devices that will eventually go into the tree, into the trees. They're solar powered, so they don't require batteries. They're maintenance free, and they should last for about 10, 15 years. But of course, a key question you've just asked: how do those devices, once they detect a wildfire, actually send out the alert? Right? They need some form of communication environment. And of course, at first, because I'm a mobile network guy, I thought, well, let's use 4G and narrowband IoT and all of those wonders that I've been working on for the last decade or so. But the reality is that in the forest, there hardly isn't any network coverage. I guess we've all experienced that if you do a hike, you typically don't have any network coverage because the operators don't bother to put up the massively expensive mobile network infrastructure in areas where there are no customers, right? And so we cannot, for our system, rely on 4G or even 5G, not even 2G. It's just not viable. There are some areas of forest where there is network coverage, but the vast majorities of the large network forests are not covered with mobile networks. So we had to build our own, and that's exactly what we're doing. A key part of what Dryad is doing is not just building the sensors, but also the communications infrastructure for the sensors. And we're not using 4G, we're not using 5G because that's horribly expensive. You need to pay license fees to the governments. They ask for literally billions if you want to do that, and we don't have that funding. What we're using is a network technology called LoRa. And LoRa is something like Wi-Fi. It's free to air. You can use it. You don't need to pay license fees. But unlike Wi-Fi, it can bridge 10, 15 kilometers of range. And of course, that's that's more suitable for the areas that we try to cover. So we're building a mobile network infrastructure for our sensors. It's not a network infrastructure where you can send your YouTube videos over there, but it's enough for our sensors to send out an alert. It's a very tiny amount of data that needs to be transmitted.
Yeah,
so we're building up. Sorry.
I guess the other thing with LoRa, as you're mentioning there, is it's really useful for small amounts of data, but because it's low, it can be low power, and that's why your sensors can last so long on solar power. Is that right?
Yeah, well, they last indefinitely as long as the electronics don't break, right? So they get recharged every day, enough energy to last through the night. And so theoretically they could last for decades. Not sure if the electronics will survive that long, or but 15 years is what we're targeting at the moment. Yes.
So you earlier on you threw out some very interesting statistics. So wildfires are 20% of the carbon emissions.
Right.
Of those, I think you said 87% of them are caused by humans.
That's right, unfortunately.
And you want to try and eliminate as much of that as possible. I guess this isn't all happening in the Amazon. I guess there's wildfires all over the place. Can you give us a sense of how many wildfires are happening around us all the time?
Well, I think Europe, which is where we are located, we're based in Berlin, Germany, is not immune to wildfires at all. We've got about 50,000 wildfires each year in Europe. Germany is about 700. And in the area where I do live here in Berlin, and the last 2 years, we've had the worst wildfires in a time span of 100 years. So it is very much something that is not just the Amazon, even though that makes the news a lot in California, but it's happening everywhere. Greece, Portugal is hit a lot. Spain, Poland, even Sweden has a lot of wildfires each year, and devastating ones. So it's clearly not just the biggest wildfires in the Amazon that are a big problem we need to solve. We need to go to Europe, Australia, United States. Siberia is a huge problem with peat fires each year. That's causing enormous amount of CO2 to be exposed into the air. So it's a global problem, really, and it's accelerating at a dramatic pace due to climate change, because we've seen more intensified period of droughts, which of course increases the risks of wildfires dramatically.
So you're talking about potentially hundreds, thousands of deployments across hundreds of thousands of forests.
Well, if we achieve our visions, yes. So the vision really of Dryad is not just to look at Germany, but to look at it on a global basis. Now, of course, that's a steep challenge and a tough call for a small company that just got funded and is building its product. But hey, A, you got to have ambitions, and B, I've scaled companies before, so it's possible as a small company to have a global impact if you find the right partners. And that's actually our strategy. So in order to go to market, we'll be working on what's called an OEM strategy. OEM means basically you're licensing your technology to other companies, and they're bringing it to market, often under their own brands. And that's exactly our intention. So we're building the key technology and the products, and we're already reaching out and seeing pretty good interest by large companies to actually take this technology once it's developed and tested and bring it to market in the regions. And that's, if that's successful, how we can scale globally, even though we're just a small startup.
Wow. So in terms of that, the 87% of the 20%, if you got a sense of how much you want to take a bite out of that particular cake in the next couple of years, what's your target?
Well, we obviously are aligned to SDGs, and we've got some KPIs in our business plan. They're hugely varying, of course, depending on how quickly we can take this to market, right? But just to give an example, if we deployed, let's say in Australia, which of course has huge issues with wildfires each year, and we only stop one of the biggest wildfires that they have each year. We can prevent millions of tons of CO2 from being exposed into the air just by preventing one wildfire, right? So it's very difficult to predict how much impact we will have, because it depends a lot on where we will deploy the system first and how many fires will we be able to stop. Now, our intention, of course, is to go into those areas where we can have the biggest impact. And that clearly is United States and Australia at the moment, where the particularly United States, with the new administration in place, I'm having high hopes that they're more open for solutions on climate change. But even Australia, with their current government, I think is interested in these kind of solutions. I'm not very optimistic on Brazil at the moment, but that might change in the future, hopefully, as well. So our impact ambitions are clearly on climate action. So SDG 13 is one of our key goals that we want to focus on, of course. And there is clearly the CO2 reduction. And yes, we're predicting to take millions or prevent millions of tons of CO2 to go into the air by preventing those wildfires. But we also have other SDGs we want to focus on. It's the biodiversity is a key aspect of the impact that we want to have. If you look at Australia, for example, the last wildfire, about 1 billion animals, 1 billion animals died during those fires. And of course, I'm thinking, oh, it's probably ants. No, it's not ants. It's reptiles and up. And that the impact has been estimated to be 1 billion animals that died. So the impact on biodiversity of wildfires is devastating, and particularly if we know that about three quarters of all biodiversity is in the forest worldwide. So every hectare of forest that we lose takes a bite out of that biodiversity.
Wow. So you touched on the SDGs there, and we aligned with those. That's really interesting and good to get that alignment. We also talked a little bit about some of the things that have changed, like the US administration. So if we can take a moment to take a little bit of kind of a retrospective look over the last 2 years to see what changed for both good and bad, but then also move forward maybe 5 years. What do you need? What do you hope will change in the next 5 years to help us reach those SDG goals?
Well, I think what has changed in the last 2 to 3 years is that increasingly there is awareness for the problem, finally, on a mass scale, not just a few people who know what's happening, but it's something that's becoming more widespread, I guess. And that's good, because it really has to happen, I guess. If once you dig into the issue, you understand we have to act. If we don't act, we will not have much future for our children to inherit. So there is no alternative to act. And the thing that's not yet happening enough, despite the fact that we all know that it needs to be done, is actual action. What I'm very happy about to see is that the financial markets are beginning to understand the impacts of climate change, and they act rationally, right? Because that, at least they pretend to, and they work on predictions and risk, and that's basically what's driving them to divest from carbon-intensive industries, which will be hit by climate change the most from an economic perspective, and drive into sustainable industries the financial resources that they have. And we're talking about trillions of dollars or euro, whatever currency you're looking at. If the financial markets are starting to react and divest from carbon-intensive industries and put these vast amount of money into a sustainable industry, that will drive a huge change, probably a much bigger change than any political party or any government can ever have. So that's a silent change that I'm seeing. with the CEO of BlackRock, for example, telling people, let's get out of carbon and move into sustainable. That's an important thing that will have a lot of change moving forward. But I'm also seeing on the political landscape really positive signs, at least hopeful signs. The Green New Deal that the European Union is cooking up sounds really, really good. I forgot the number. It's 1.7 trillion euro or something that they want to pour into the economy to foster and accelerate the green transition. Because it's not just wildfires we need to stop. We need to transform the entire industry if we want to stop this. So I'm hopeful that we can turn a corner, but it's not fast enough. It needs to accelerate and it needs to become dramatic.
You picked up on some really interesting points that I've been tracking as well. The BlackRock piece, did he call it the $170 trillion mega trend?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
170, something like that. So
I saw that. Yeah.
That as a very positive move.
Yes.
I've also in an interview I conducted yesterday, somebody told me her motivation is something her father said, which was be good ancestors, which I think is a nice way of looking at it. But to your point about acting, like you, my career was mostly telecoms and kind of, I guess, unashamedly back then, chasing the money. I was young, I needed the money, but now I've got to a point where I can start to really sit back and think, what's this for? What's the point? Why am I doing this? And that's really led me to do what we're doing today. And in doing that, I've realized how much good is actually going on. There is so much going on all over the planet. One of the challenges I see is bringing all of that together in some kind of consistent way to have a greater impact than all of these small things happening around. Do you think this is something that will get better? And how would you suggest or advise people to try and get their small projects part of something bigger to have a bigger impact?
Well, I think what you're doing here is a good example of spreading the word and increasing awareness is an absolute key aspect, because yes, awareness has increased for these solutions and the problems, but it needs to further increase. So get the word out. Don't stop talking about it. It's not a topic that's going away. It's not boring. It won't ever get boring. It's just only going to get more exciting, and it's got to become sexy to solve the problem. And it is actually, it feels really good if you change the side of the fence. Like you have been chasing money, and I've done 3 exits, so I've done that. That's fine, but chasing even more money is not just satisfying anymore. Right? What is satisfying, deeply satisfying, is actually to work on solutions that are intending to solve real problems. And what we do is an example, but there are hundreds and thousands of other examples that need to be solved, and people doing amazing things. But once you start doing it, you look back at what you've done so far, you think, well, that was kind of boring. I mean, why did I build that smartphone app? Really, what did I change with that? Did I change anything other than generate some numbers on a bank account? But I didn't really change anything, right? So, and now doing something that actually potentially, if it works, can really have an impact. That's so deeply satisfying. So I think it's so rewarding to jump on this bandwagon. And at the same time, it's not bad to make money at all. And I'm thinking what you can do is, I've heard this somebody saying, doing well while doing good. And I think we're an example of trying to do that. Yes, we want to change something big, but we're not a charity. We're not a non-profit organization. We do want to make money from this, and we do have a business case, right? And I'm not ashamed of saying that we want to be a profitable company doing good, because the more profitable we will be, the more we can pour into the product, the more acceleration we can have as a company. So it's good to be profitable if you're doing good. And therefore, I'm not ashamed of trying to do that. And in our case, Your wildfires are causing, I think, about $140 billion of economic damage each year. And that's, of course, a great business case, right? Yes, we want to have an impact, but I can also go to insurance companies and say, look, you guys, you pay $40 billion of insurance claims each year because of wildfires. How about making a deal to prevent those $40 billion from being spent next year? Right? So there is a clear business case for us that we can sell to those that have the money, while at the same time prevent climate change from happening, or at least help to prevent it a little bit.
Wonderful, wonderful. I normally ask my guests, if they can provide some words of inspiration or some guidance.
Okay.
You've done a lot of that.
Sorry if I answered your question before you've asked.
No,
that.
it's great. I mean, I can just tear up my script and off we go. It's great. I will ask you one last thing though. Is there something we haven't touched on? Is there some kind of passing words of wisdom or inspiration that you'd like to share with everybody who's watching?
Well, as I said, spread the word. There is, interviews like you are doing, and the whole initiative that you're doing is great. Let's spread the word and keep on tweeting about it and Facebooking about it, and talk about it on Zoom video calls with your family, on wherever you're going to see or meet them, because it's much more interesting than the last football game, I think.
Excellent. Well, Carsten, thank you so much. I'll ask you just lastly, if people want to know more, where should they go to find out more?
Well, obviously, we've got a website. It's Dryad.net. That's our company. So if you want to get in touch with us, or you're interested in doing things, or just want to have a chat, please reach out.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll put the links in below the video, and I'll just remind everybody who's watching, please do click like, please do subscribe to the channel and get all of the other updates and interviews that are coming soon. So Carsten, thank you once again. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Thanks, Scott.